Okay, so laid out in order, you see two pieces of cane. These are actually unsoaked cane. I have the other already soaked and ready to go. You see next to that is the splitter, which you actually split the cane tubes open with. This is actually a tool to measure the circumference of the cane. Some people prefer wider reeds and some people prefer skinnier reeds, so it just depends on your personal preference, sort of what your oboe likes and what you like when you go to choose a piece of cane to gouge it and make it into a reed. These are the tools that you use to pre-gouge. The cane is actually super thick when you split it open, so you have to pre-gouge it before you ever do any gouging. And this is the actual gouger. This part right here is the part where it opens like this, and you put the cane on top and you scrape it, and I will show you how to do that later. And this is the guillotine, which chops off a bit of excess cane if it's too long to fit on the gouger. So then after you've gouged it a little bit, you have to measure it with the micrometer for thickness. I do my reeds 45 millimeters on the sides and 60 in the middle. I don't know if that's pretty standard, but that's what I do, and it tends to work. Because if you get it any thicker, then you're going to overcompensate when you start scraping, and if you get it thinner, then you're also going to overcompensate, and it will just make a reed that doesn't do much for you. So I will also show you how that works once I get the cane gouged. And then you're going to need standard things like a pencil, a ruler, and razor blades for measuring the cane at the end. Alright, and this is your tool for shaping the cane. It's actually a lot simpler than gouging. All you need is the actual shaper and the shaper tip, which I use the Adam Caleb -1 shaper tip for my reeds, and I like it a lot because I play on an old Luray, and having kind of a wider reed sort of brings out the sound a little bit better. Now we're going to do the first part of the process, the splitting of the cane, and that just goes on like so, covers, and I just hit it gently, and it splits into 3 pieces. Alright, so from splitting we move on to pre-gouging. I feel like I'm in a cooking show right now, but anyway, we move to pre-gouging, which can be a little difficult because you have to make sure the cane is just completely flat when you go to push it through. And there we go. And now it's a little bit flatter than it was because it took off quite a big chunk. So that's pre-gouging. Now we're going to move on to gouging. Okay, this piece of cane is actually a little bit longer than it'll fit on the gouger, so you put it on the guillotine like so, and well, first I'm going to pick the side that I think will be best for me, and it's this side. So you just chop off, I look foolish, this little bit right here is done for. So then you put it on the gouger, and the fun part begins. Gouging. Now, as a left-handed person, I find it difficult sometimes to gouge with my right hand, just because my right hand isn't quite as strong as my left hand, so it can't push down as hard on the cane. So sometimes I have to switch it up. Okay, so after I've gouged a little bit, I have all of these nice shavings, and here is the finished piece of cane. I'm going to take my micrometer now and measure it just to make sure. Don't know if you'll be able to see the measurements on the camera, but let's see. Okay, yeah, for the middle here, we're at about 60, and then on the sides, we got around 45. 45, 50, somewhere in there. Okay, now before I can do any shaping, I have to actually divide the reed in half because it's still very thick, and so it's going to be hard to find out exactly where to divide it. So I always measure it with my ruler, and it always measures up to 74 millimeters. So if you divide that in half, you get 37. I always make sure to mark it at 37. And then you need your reed knife, and you just divide it in half very, very carefully. It doesn't have to be completely even when you fold it in half, but it has to be even enough so that it's not super unbalanced. I actually got this one surprisingly even, and I'm kind of proud right now. So that is just dividing it in half. Then it's a little bit too wide for the shaper right now, so I'm going to take a razor blade and sort of take a little bit off of each side. Not too much, because then it just won't seal and that'll be really bad. So I just shave it off a little bit. Now it should fit. Perfect. Now the point of shaping is to actually get this cane into a reed shape. So you basically just take the razor and go to town with scraping it off on each side. And I made sure that this was nice and tight so it wouldn't slide around and give me an uneven sort of reed. And you also don't want to go too far with the scraping, too vigorously, so that it won't be too skinny on one side. And another thing is to make sure that it's not too rough around the edges on a nice smooth reed, because it'll help seal it better. Let's see, there, that's enough. Okay, then you take it, well, it usually jumps off for me, and you've got a nice piece of reed cane.